Cold mornings. Joey, I've let go of the anger. Her voice faded into a soft murmur. Concrete blonde, you're definitely more forgiving than I am. Jimmy Scomberger chuckled while fixing his tie. Oh, you think? He remarked as I touched myself by Diviniles echoed in the background. Nice choice, Spot, you're on a roll today. And, there goes the streak, Jimmy sighed as the sign by Ace of Base began to play. Seems like you're in a 90s mood, huh? Are we ready to go? Is Daddy's little princess all set? Jimmy cooed, lifting Guinevere from her crib. Guinevere giggled and wriggled as her dad playfully nibbled on her belly. Just as they were about to step out, she made a face and the unmistakable sound of a diaper in need of changing filled the room. Jimmy removed his jacket with a resigned sigh and carefully tucked his tie into his shirt. Now, no peeing on Daddy, okay? We're already late, Jimmy warned, just managing to contain a little accident with her diaper. Guinevere faced Scomberger, didn't I just say? After a quick cleanup and a fresh diaper, they were finally ready to leave the trailer. This time, they made it to the minivan without any more surprises. You're such a beautiful girl, yes you are, he sang softly, securing her in the car seat. You look so much like your mom, Jimmy murmured, planting a loving kiss on her forehead before closing the minivan door. Jimmy Scomberger first saw Marla Faye Toombs as they both nervously entered Kimball Academy, just two of the 48th graders stepping into a vast and daunting new world. Jimmy always remembered his grandpa's words, Babe Ruth struck out a lot more than he hit home runs. Hi, I'm Jimmy Scomberger, he said with a grin, approaching the striking blonde girl. Hi, I'm Marla Toombs. Do you know where room 112 is? She asked. Jimmy's grandfather kindly drove them to the movies for their first date. The old man appeared touched as he watched his grandson and Marla step out of the car, holding hands in the queue for movie tickets. He parked the car, sat on the hood of his 1984 Buick LeSabre, and lit a cigarette. After a while, the young couple emerged from the theater, still hand in hand. Enjoy the movie? The grandfather inquired as Jimmy courteously let Marla into the back seat first. Yes, Marla replied with a smile. Sure did, sir, added Jimmy. Yeah, it was great, Marla echoed. Jimmy received his first kiss outside Marla's kitchen door. He blushed but couldn't hide his happiness, especially when his grandpa gave him an encouraging thumbs up. When Jimmy asked Marla about going skating, she hesitated. I wish I could, but my dad's back, and we have plans at Bricks on 54. You know, the place with the flying pizza. Jimmy later decided to join Eldridge and Mitty at the go-kart ranch in Pin Oak. While at the attached video arcade, he was surprised to see Marla with an older boy from their school. How was the pizza? Jimmy asked, noticing Marla's startled reaction. Shortly afterward, Kenny Sampson, Marla's friend, confronted Jimmy with a shove. Despite the tension, Jimmy remained calm and composed. Are you sure you want to do this? Jimmy asked, still smiling. Kenny was bigger and older but acted impulsively. His first swing missed entirely. A brief scuffle ensued before the manager intervened, escorting Jimmy out and assisting Kenny into a seat. Eldridge, he started it, the manager stated. I did not, Kenny protested weakly, feeling his sore jaw. It's all on the security cameras, Mitty pointed out, indicating the cameras around the noisy arcade. He came over to us, shoved Jimmy first, and then tried to hit him. And then he got more than he bargained for. Eldridge couldn't help but laugh. Jimmy handled it pretty well. Keith Sampson arrived at the trailer with a flurry of anger, banging loudly on the door. When Grandpa emerged, he listened to the man's heated accusations before calmly explaining that Keith's son was the instigator. Your son was the one who started the trouble, not my grandson, Grandpa stated firmly. Keith, struggling with his emotion, eventually made his way to his truck and drove to St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center. He concocted a story about being attacked by several assailants, unwilling to admit he had instigated the conflict and been bested by an older man. In school, Marla approached Jimmy with a more casual stance on their relationship. We're only 13, Jimmy. Maybe we're taking things too seriously, she suggested. Jimmy felt disappointed. You could have just been honest with me, Marla. But it's fine, I don't date people who aren't straightforward with me, he replied. Over the next few years, they occasionally crossed paths in their small high school. Jimmy remained courteous but didn't pursue anything further with Marla. He had a few altercations with Kenny, Marla's friend, who seemed to blame Jimmy for his own lack of attention from her. In their final confrontation, Kenny brought along Doug for support. 2 against 1, huh? Kenny taunted. Jimmy, undeterred, defended himself with surprising strength, leaving both Kenny and Doug regretting their decision to confront him. Meanwhile, Jenna West, a cheerful redhead cheerleader, approached Jimmy during football practice. Hey, Jimmy, Marla really likes you, she said, giggling. Thanks for letting me know, Jenna, Jimmy responded, focusing back on his warm-up drills. As homecoming week approached, it became clear that Marla and her friends had influenced the other girls' opinion, leaving Jimmy without a date for the dance. Some cheerleaders hinted that Marla was hoping Jimmy would ask her to the dance. I appreciate it, but I'm not planning to go, Jimmy replied, deciding to steer clear of the drama. Marla eventually confronted Jimmy directly, trying to mend fences. We were just kids back then, Jimmy. We're both 17 now, juniors in high school. I've grown up a lot since then, and I really miss my best friend, she pleaded. Jimmy listened, but he had learned to be cautious. He valued honesty and straightforwardness, qualities he felt were important in any relationship. I remember how nervous I was on our first day, and then this really kind boy approached me, Marla said, her eyes shining with fond memories. They went on a double date for prom with Marla's cousin Brianna and her boyfriend Sandy. Grandpa, initially hesitant, ended up supporting Jimmy's participation by contributing to the limo rental and giving some extra money for dinner and photos. Have a great time, Tiger, Grandpa said as the limo pulled up. The night was enjoyable, with a lovely dinner and dance. Afterwards, they decided to head to Marla's house, since it was empty. Jimmy felt content, being with someone he admired so much. However, the atmosphere changed when Marla and Brianna began to indulge in alcohol. Jimmy was accustomed to drinking but preferred moderation. Upon returning from the bathroom, Jimmy unexpectedly found Marla and Sandy in an intimate moment, with Brianna also less inhibited. Without saying anything, Jimmy quietly left the house. Soon after, Sandy, Marla, and Brianna caught up with him, trying to convince him to come back. Marla was apologetic, insisting it was just playful behavior. Sandy, however, made some rude comments, irritating Jimmy. "Stop it, Sandy," Marla yelled at him, then implored Jimmy, "Please come back. It was just a bit of fun." Jimmy stood his ground, expressing his distaste for Sandy's attitude. Sandy, frustrated, stopped the car abruptly. Marla continued to plead with Jimmy, worried about the potential fallout. The night ended with Marla facing some serious consequences, while Sandy's relationships with Brianna and Marla deteriorated. Despite the night's events, Grandpa was pleased with a photograph of Jimmy and his date, proud of how his grandson had conducted himself. Jimmy and Marla had minimal social interaction until the final weeks of their senior year, almost 1.5 years since the homecoming dance. Jimmy maintained his usual polite and civil demeanor whenever they were around each other at Kimball Academy. "Jimmy, the senior prom is coming up soon," Marla mentioned one day, joining him at a table in the library. "Yes, Mrs. Cavillion keeps reminding us every morning," Jimmy replied, focusing on his notes. "And, well, no one has asked me to go," Marla hinted. "That's surprising," Jimmy commented, still engrossed in his studies. "Jimmy, could you?" Marla started to ask. "What about Brandon Simonox?" Jimmy inquired, moving on to another book. "Brandon? No way," Marla dismissed the idea. Jimmy didn't respond further. He finished his research, politely nodded to Marla, and left with his books. Later, Marla approached him again during lunch. "Jimmy, could we talk about prom?" "I'm not interested, but thank you," Jimmy answered. "If only we had a consolation prize for you." He then humorously imitated a game show host. "Marla Toombs, you've won a special prize of better luck next time. Enjoy it with a dash of move on and grow." Marla left the cafeteria, visibly upset, while Jimmy shrugged off the curious glances from some staff members. After school, Jimmy visited his grandfather at the St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center. Grandpa was asleep when Jimmy arrived, so he quietly did his homework. A nurse later came in, checking on Grandpa and waking him up. "Hey," Grandpa greeted weakly. "Hey, Grandpa," Jimmy responded with a smile. Jimmy shared with his grandfather about Marla's recent invitation to the prom, expressing his reservations. Grandpa listened carefully, offering his perspective. "Jimmy, just remember to stay true to yourself, whatever you decide," Grandpa advised sagely. "I'm not planning to pursue anything with Marla, Grandpa," Jimmy assured him firmly. Grandpa nodded, understanding Jimmy's stance. "It's important to move forward, Jimmy. What about other friends or interests you've had? It's good to explore different relationships and experiences. So, what do you think I should do?" Jimmy asked, seeking guidance. "Think about what's best for you. Going to prom could be a way to find closure or just enjoy the event without any pressure," Grandpa suggested gently. The next morning, Jimmy ran into Marla at school. After some thought, he agreed to her prom request, with a clear condition. "All right, but it's just going to be us. No group outings," he said. Marla was ecstatic, expressing her joy with an enthusiastic hug and a quick peck on the cheek. Ms. Toombs, Mr. Cousins, their teacher, interjected, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. "Sorry, sir," Marla replied quickly, darting off to share her excitement with her friends. Later, an exhausted Jimmy visited Grandpa again. Grandpa, perceptive as always, sensed the outcome of Jimmy's decision. "So, you're taking her to the prom then?" Grandpa asked, briefly moving his oxygen mask. Jimmy dressed up for the prom, renting a tuxedo and picking out a tasteful corsage from Annie's Floral Designs. They enjoyed a delightful dinner at Hanging Gardens in Elgee, known for its authentic Thai cuisine. Connie Edwards captured several photos of the happy couple, and they participated in the prom festivities, casting their votes for king and queen. After the prom, they found themselves at Marla's house, which was empty. Marla, in a celebratory mood, mixed some drinks with Albertson's gin and various liqueurs. The evening took a more relaxed turn as Marla shed her formal attire, signaling a shift in the mood. As the night unfolded, Jimmy was mindful of his past experiences. Unlike his encounters with Bethany, Keandra, and Candy, Marla seemed more engaged and expressive in their intimate moments. This contrasted with his previous experiences, where each relationship had its own unique dynamics. Marla's openness and affection were evident, creating a deeper connection between them. Despite Marla's suggestion, Jimmy insisted on using protection, showing his responsibility and care. This approach was different from his past relationships, where the expectations and attitudes varied considerably. Their time together was intense and emotional, with Marla expressing her feelings openly. Afterward, the night continued with a sense of playfulness and closeness, reflecting a genuine connection. As dawn approached, Marla led Jimmy to the door. She was carefree and affectionate as she said goodbye, a contrast to the formal atmosphere of the earlier prom. Back with his grandfather, Jimmy shared a reserved smile, indicating a complex mix of feelings about the night. "I guess," he responded to Grandpa's query, showing a mix of reflection and uncertainty. "Anything you need, Grandpa?" Jimmy asked, shifting his focus to caring for his grandfather. Jimmy faced a somber moment as he attended his grandfather's funeral 4 days later. In a tribute to his grandfather's preferences, he placed an unopened can of St. Elizabeth lager and a pack of Winston's cigarettes in the casket. Overwhelmed with emotion, Jimmy tried to express his love, but was overtaken by sobs. Marla approached him at school, offering condolences. "I'm so sorry about your grandfather," she whispered. "Thank you," Jimmy replied, his voice distant. "Yeah, he took us on our first date, didn't he?" Marla recalled, trying to offer some comfort as they walked together. Later that day, Marla visited Jimmy at his trailer, trying to offer support in her way. Jimmy, however, was struggling with his grief in the absence of his grandfather's guidance. Without his grandfather, Jimmy found himself lacking direction and motivation for further education. He started working in construction with Robichaux Contracting, where his willingness to work hard was recognized. Paul Robichaux began teaching him sheetrock work, seeing potential in him. 2 months after his grandfather's passing, Marla arrived at his trailer with unexpected news. She was exuberant as she announced her pregnancy, showing Jimmy a positive test. Jimmy was shocked and angry, suspecting that Marla had tampered with the condoms. "You little," he muttered, his anger spilling over. Marla, undeterred, suggested a DNA test, confident of the results. In his frustration, Jimmy punched the wall, unable to contain his anger. Soon after, Garrett Toombs, Marla's father, came to discuss the situation. Jimmy didn't deny the possibility of being the father but was at a loss when Garrett pressed him about his plans. "What do you expect me to do?" Jimmy asked, feeling cornered. Garrett, visibly upset, demanded to know how Jimmy planned to handle the responsibility. "Are you going to step up? Are you going to do the right thing?" Jimmy, despite his confusion and frustration, knew he had to face the situation responsibly. "I'll cover my share. I'll pay for half of the medical expenses, half of the baby's needs. Diapers, food, everything," he stated firmly, committing to his responsibilities in the challenging situation. Garrett Toombs, clearly enraged, confronted Jimmy with a firm grip on his shirt. "You're going to do much more than just pay half," he asserted forcefully. Jimmy remained composed, warning Garrett with a calm yet firm tone. "I'm willing to pay my share, but I won't marry Marla. That's not going to happen." Garrett, struggling to maintain his composure, was taken aback by Jimmy's stance and physical warning. Later, Jimmy encountered Kenny Sampson at the bank. Kenny, eager to provoke, taunted Jimmy about the recent developments. Jimmy, uninterested in Kenny's remarks, focused on his transaction with the bank teller. When Kenny bragged about his plans with Marla, Jimmy responded with disinterest, lightly brushing off the comment. Kenny, trying to goad Jimmy further, accused him of being upset about losing Marla. Jimmy, however, dismissed this with laughter, showing no concern for Kenny's claim. Marla later visited Jimmy, mentioning her visit to the doctor and bringing up her engagement to Kenny. "Kenny asked me to marry him," she revealed, fidgeting with a button on Jimmy's shirt. "That's great for you both," Jimmy replied, nonchalantly continuing his task on his phone, paying his part of the doctor's bill. A few hours later, an intoxicated Marla arrived at his door, visibly upset and lashing out physically. Jimmy let her in, trying to calm her down as she expressed her emotions through tears and frustration. Marla arrived at Jimmy's place in a state of emotional turmoil, upset about her impending marriage to Kenny. "Can you believe it? Kenny Sampson is going to marry me and you don't even care," she exclaimed in distress. Jimmy remained indifferent. "No, I don't," he admitted straightforwardly. Marla's visit quickly escalated into an argument, with both expressing their frustrations and resentment. The tension between them was palpable, reflecting their complicated history. In the following days, Marla dropped by again to discuss financial matters, specifically mentioning maternity clothes. Jimmy's response was dismissive. "That's something for you and Kenny to figure out. I'm only responsible for my agreed share," he stated, indicating he wouldn't contribute beyond his obligations. Jimmy discarded the wedding invitation he received. Keith Sampson, Kenny's father, had aggressively warned him against attending the wedding, but Jimmy had no intention of going and casually brushed off the threat. Reflecting on the situation, Jimmy mused, "Kenny's marrying her. Well, that's his choice." On the eve of her wedding, Marla visited Jimmy again, bringing more bills and hinting at a possible reconciliation. Jimmy, however, was clear in his response. "There's nothing between us, Marla. I don't feel anything for you. We're done," he stated unequivocally. Their interaction, fueled by a mix of emotion, led to a physical encounter that was intense and fraught with unresolved feelings. Marla's frustration and Jimmy's indifference culminated in a moment that was more about their past than their future. Afterwards, Marla left Jimmy's trailer in a flurry of emotions, feeling betrayed and angry. Jimmy, maintaining his detached stance, watched her go, raising a glass of whiskey and a solitary toast, a gesture that seemed to symbolize the end of their tumultuous relationship. Hours after the wedding, Jimmy, alone in his trailer and deep in his cups, drunkenly mused to the emptiness, "You know, you were the best I ever had." The next day, Marla left a voicemail for Jimmy, her voice breaking with emotion. "Jimmy, I love you." Jimmy listened but chose not to delete the message. Kenny, Marla's new husband, was furious when he discovered the mark on Marla's body, a remnant of her last encounter with Jimmy. Marla hastily concocted a story, blaming it on a prank at her bachelorette party. When pressed by Kenny, she blamed Shelley Cronor, a bridesmaid, for the act. During their honeymoon in New Orleans, Marla's indulgence in alcohol led to excessive bar tabs and Kenny getting into altercations due to her flirtatious behavior. The situation worsened when they returned home, with Marla getting her third Dewey after crashing Keith Sampson's new truck. Concerned about the welfare of his unborn child, Jimmy sought legal assistance. He found Amelia Waters, an attorney dedicated to children's rights. At Marla's arraignment, Amelia represented Jimmy, surprising Marla, who had initially thought Jimmy was there to support her. Judge Jesse Johnson inquired about Marla's pregnancy during the hearing. When Marla was slow to respond, her public defender prodded her, leading to Marla reluctantly revealing she was 5 months pregnant. Jimmy's decision to involve a lawyer indicated his intention to ensure the well-being of his child, despite the complexities of his relationship with Marla. Judge Jesse Johnson, presiding over Marla's case, ordered her to complete a 90-day program at the CDU followed by house arrest until the birth of her child. Marla was shocked at the verdict. "I can't believe this," Marla exclaimed in disbelief. The public defender, busy with her next case, hardly paid attention to Marla's reaction. A bailiff gently moved Marla's wheelchair to clear the way. "I hate you," Marla shouted at Jimmy, who was in a discussion with Amelia, Kenny, and Keith Sampson. Feelings mutual, Jimmy replied briefly before turning back to the conversation, where Kenny was adamantly requesting a paternity test. Marla's stay at the CDU was short-lived. She was asked to leave after only 3 days due to inappropriate conduct with other patients and a staff member. Kenny's frustration escalated when the paternity test confirmed Jimmy as the father, though Marla tried to appease him by claiming she thought Kenny was the father. Shortly after, Marla's house arrest was revoked following an incident where she attempted to shoplift from a grocery store. Keith Sampson, concerned about the ongoing issues and financial burdens, advised his son to reconsider his relationship with Marla. When Jimmy visited Marla in the DeGard lockup, she declared her love for him. Jimmy, however, was there with a different purpose. "I'm suing for full custody of our child," he stated. "Full custody of what?" Marla asked, confused. "Our baby," Jimmy clarified. "I'm suing for full custody." Marla reacted with hostility, refusing to consider Jimmy's custody claim. "I'd rather harm the baby than let you have it," she spat angrily. Jimmy, undeterred, pointed out the impracticality of her plan. "Do you think they'll let you keep the baby in here? And Kenny doesn't want to raise a child that isn't his." Marla, defiant yet trapped in her own delusions, continued to insist on Kenny's involvement. Jimmy left the visit disillusioned with Marla's unwillingness to face reality. Through his lawyer, Amelia, Jimmy managed to secure full custody of his child. Marla was in disbelief, having assumed that Kenny Sampson, her manipulative partner, would have fought for custody. To her shock, Kenny didn't even appear at the custody hearing. Marla pleaded with the judge, hoping her parents would be granted custody instead. But Jimmy, with a hint of sarcasm, questioned the parenting skills she had been exposed to. Marla, in a moment of distress, made a shocking threat. Amelia quickly intervened, revealing they had taken legal precautions against Marla. In the courtroom, Marla's pleas to Jimmy were heart-wrenching as she was escorted out by an officer. Her cries echoed through the hall as the door shut behind her. Amelia remarked on the situation's difficulty. Jimmy, seemingly accustomed to such scenes, agreed but noted that the impact lessens over time. Marla's daughter, Guinevere Faye Schoenberger, arrived prematurely. When Marla went into labor in jail, the guards initially didn't believe her, but she was soon rushed to St. Elizabeth Parish Trauma Center. In the hospital, Marla was overwhelmed with emotions, directing her anger and blame towards Jimmy, her parents, and Kenny. Jimmy, present during the birth, reminded Marla of her own actions that led them here, as Marla struggled through the pain of childbirth. Guinevere, born underweight, stayed in the hospital to gain strength. Jimmy, gazing at his daughter, felt a mix of love and fear, recognizing the enormity and fragility of his new role as a father. When Marla was released from jail 3 months later, Kenny, her husband, reluctantly took her back. This decision disappointed his father, Keith, who warned Kenny of the potential consequences of getting entangled in Marla's troubles again. After consuming all the alcohol she could find in the trailer, including a bottle of vanilla extract and Listerine mouthwash, Marla decided to call Jimmy using Kenny's phone. "Hey, I'm back," she said, slurring her words. Jimmy, woken up in the middle of the night, responded irritably. "Marla, it's 3:20 in the morning. What do you want?" Marla demanded to see her baby, but Jimmy firmly refused and ended the call. He then blocked Kenny's number, trying to get some sleep. However, his daughter, Guinevere, needed attention, waking him up again. While caring for Guinevere, Jimmy humorously commented on dealing with challenging situation, playfully referring to both Marla and Guinevere as crazy blondes. Weeks later, Marla unexpectedly showed up at Jimmy's trailer with a friend, Angela Gernod. Angela appeared unkempt and in distress, wearing a dirty school uniform. Marla introduced her, claiming they wanted to see the baby. In reality, Marla and Angela had nowhere to go. Kenny had locked Marla out, and both their families had turned them away. They were actually scouting Jimmy's place, hoping to find something to steal. When they approached, Jimmy quickly realized their intention and decisively pushed Marla away from the door, securing it shut. Frustrated and disappointed, Jimmy could only curse as Marla started banging on the door. Marla and Angela persisted in their noisy attempts for about 5 minutes. In response, Jimmy called the police. As soon as Marla and Angela noticed a police cruiser approaching, they fled the scene, but the commotion had already disturbed the baby, who was now crying loudly. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Jimmy spoke to the police officer, explaining that he needed a report to pursue a restraining order, all while trying to soothe his distressed daughter. "Yes, sir," Officer Leanne Pyle responded with a warm smile. "Hi there, little one. I just adore babies." Jimmy chuckled, replying, "That's what everyone says, until they have to change a diaper." He couldn't help but notice how Officer Pyle, a striking redhead, looked in her neatly fitted uniform. Later that night, Jimmy was startled awake by a loud boom. After checking that his trailer and his daughter, Guinevere, were safe, he stepped outside. The neighboring trailers were undisturbed. Glimpsing a glow through the trees, he turned on the TV and saw Summer Duhan from Performance 12 News reporting on a fire. Jimmy smiled, admitting to himself his fondness for the beautiful blonde reporter. As he was about to sleep again, Guinevere needed attention. Tiredly, Jimmy prepared a bottle of formula for her. A week after Marla's visit with her friend, Jimmy drove to a modest building, laughing at himself as he adjusted his tie which he'd forgotten to fix after changing his daughter's diaper. He glanced at Guinevere sleeping peacefully in the back seat and softly spoke, "Stay asleep for a bit longer, okay?" Entering the building, Jimmy noticed Kenny's glaring, resentful gaze and Keith Sampson's weary look. The atmosphere was heavy as he walked towards the casket. Jimmy kneeled, offering a prayer for the departed young mother. As he stood up, he reflected on Marla's probable reaction to the simple, closed casket, especially given the circumstances of her death. Marla, always one for appearances, would have wanted a more elaborate display. The fire had left no option for an open casket, and for days, there had been confusion about her identity. It was only through her expensive jewelry and dental records that they confirmed it was Marla, not Brenda Jo Browsard, who had perished. As Jimmy settled into a pew with Guinevere, Kenny confronted him aggressively. The tension in the room was palpable, reflecting the complex web of emotions and relationships surrounding Marla's tragic end. "I'm here to show respect for someone I once considered a friend," Jimmy stated clearly, his voice carrying through the quiet room. He reminded everyone present, "She was the mother of my child, after all." At this, Kenny's father, Keith, intervened, prompting Kenny to return to his seat. Jimmy scanned the room, his eyes settling on a woman who closely resembled Marla, likely her mother, silently grieving. Nearby sat Garrett Toombs, a familiar face from the past, now visibly aged and weary. Jimmy quietly reflected, "Marla, you wouldn't have liked this." Hardly anyone came to say goodbye. He noticed the floral arrangements, including his own, and wondered who else might have contributed. As he was about to leave, his daughter woke up, her cries drawing attention. Jimmy offered a brief, apologetic smile to the attendees and quickly exited with his daughter to change her diaper. In the men's room, he efficiently tended to Guinevere and fed her a warm bottle. Settling on a couch in the funeral home's lobby, Keith Sampson approached him with a mix of good and bad news. "They grow up," Keith said, implying both the joy and challenges of raising a child. He then expressed his condolences for Jimmy's grandfather and the current situation, before wishing him luck and departing. The funeral was even less attended than the visitation. Jimmy and Guinevere were among the first to leave, leaving behind only a few, including Marla's parents and relatives from Kimball Academy. As he drove away from the cemetery, Jimmy quietly affirmed to himself, "Marla, I'm no longer angry." The sense of closure was palpable as he moved forward with his life and his daughter. My comment, was this a completed story like you imagined? Do you think OP did a decent job here? Let me know what you think and I will prepare another one soon.